The book I'm going to talk about today is one of those books that I had no idea what to expect when I was going into it. I asked it for Christmas as I had been for my summer holidays to Provence, and I just really felt like reading a book about that region in France, as it feels quite special to me. This book is called The Artist by Lucy Steeds, and it is about a young aspiring journalist from London who travels to speak and interview a renowned French artist named Edouard Tartuffe. I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Anyone French or with good French knowledge, let me know how to pronounce that. But anyway, so he has got this amazing opportunity where he sends a letter to this artist who is renowned but has lived in seclusion for years and years and years, and he still produces art, but he hasn't been seen in the scene, in the artist scenes. He hasn't been done any interviews. He hasn't, all he does is gives his work to his art dealer, and his art dealer sells it, and that is it. And he stays in this farmhouse in the Provence countryside. This is set in 1920 as well, which is kind of like a huge artist movement, or a really, I guess, important time for artists, not just painters, but all types of artists in Paris. And that's where he originally was. And then something happened, which we don't know what happened, but something happened that made him basically move to the countryside and not speak to anyone. And he's a grumpy, cantankerous old man. You know, there's been rumours of how rude he can be and that kind of stuff. But anyway, this aside, this guy, this boy, young man called Joseph, has got this letter back to his letter to ask for an interview saying, come. And so he comes. And he arrives in the sun-drenched June. It's June time in Provence. And he arrives in the farmhouse and he meets Etty. And Etty, he doesn't really know, I don't think originally, what her relation to Edward is. And Etty basically is like, what can I say, almost like a personal assistant, housemaid, cleaner, cook, everything, so the artist Edward can just focus on his art. But it's quite clear, and it becomes clear, that Edward wouldn't be able to cope or create his art without Etty being there. So that's kind of the premise of it, and it's Joseph spending this summer there to write about the artist, to write about Edward. And the reason I want to talk about this book is not because it's like this 5 out of 5 book for me that blew me away, or I needed like something slow. I needed something, you know, there is heavy and important topics discussed in this, but there's nothing so dark. And what I really love about this book is the beauty with which Lucy speaks about the French countryside and the artists and the colours and the feel of the heat of the air of everything. And in a time like this kind of book, I can recommend to you when you've read a lot of really heavily plot driven books, or there's just a lot of like, okay, this going on, that's going on, that this is like, and I've mentioned this about another book before, but like a breath of fresh air almost. Like, oh, okay, let's just sit down, read some really beautiful writing about painting, about 1920s Provence in the beautiful countryside, in this farmhouse where these people live quite a simple life, but who's obviously very, very talented. There is another, the thing is, I'm not going to tell you what the kind of slight bit of plot there is going throughout, because I don't want to ruin the book, but there is some sort of plot going on throughout that's quite important, especially to do with women in the artist scene at that stage, and how they were, you know, probably not lauded as they should have been, and how some artists can become quite possessive of their craft and their, you know, fame, and how important they are and how important that is to them. And even though this artist seemingly doesn't care about the fame, there obviously is something in him that wants to hold tight onto it and keep it for himself, which you'll see throughout the book. There's also a lovely gentle love story in this, which I really loved, and almost like forbidden romance, but not really, which was quite beautiful to write. I just enjoyed getting into bed every night and being transported into, I read this at Christmas time, so you can imagine I was being transported into this hot summer. It was almost stiflingly hot. The kind of way in which the food you'd eat, or what you do to, you know, to wind down in the evenings to get away from the heat, and like just all those exquisite details I just loved. And if you like reading about art, about food, I would say food plays a big part in this book, which I love. One of my favourite kind of things to read about is food. I love book, and it doesn't have to be like, I don't want a book about food, I just want a book that details and describes food quite beautifully, and this sumptuous food, yeah, and then the beautiful painting, and then this summer romance, and this, yeah, and this quiet, confident girl, and this quiet, unconfident man, and they're coming together and their relationship, and it's really beautiful. I recommend this reading. If, like I've said, if you want a breath of fresh air, if you want something to transport you somewhere else, to also have some important topics in it, but it not being, like, I felt like the one downfall of this thing is it probably didn't hammer home too much for me, and it could have maybe done a little bit more. It had the opportunity, or had the, not the opportunity, but it had the, how do you say it, like the promise isn't the right word, but you know when you think, okay, this book could have made more of a thing of some of their themes that are going through it that I've discussed, but it didn't. And obviously they made that choice, that the writer, but maybe it was missing something from that. But I don't know, I think I still even really loved it, that it was just simple in its execution and its idea and how it comes to the end. I don't know how I felt about the kind of discovery, which if you read the book, you'll know. I don't know how I felt about that, but I'm not going to go into it too much, because if I can't explain it to you, then it's kind of irrelevant to speak about. But that was probably, those kind of 2 points are probably the reasons it doesn't get 5 stars for me. I think I've explained it well enough to say that if you want something that you can just read beautiful descriptions of where you are, what you're looking at, what you're eating, what you're smelling, all of that kind of stuff, and you want it set in Provence in 1920 about a very, very famed artist and his niece who helps him on, and then this a journalist or aspiring journalist who finds out this kind of big secret, but it not being this huge thing, or there's no sense of urgency, there's no oh my god, there's none of that. And sometimes we all need a bit of a nervous system reset, and that is actually exactly why I would read this book. Because if you just feel like, no, I need something pretty easy, I don't want it to be about nothing, but I need something easy, then read this book. I can totally recommend it. And even though it's not a 5 stars for me, I always think it's important to not talk about all your favourite books. But because there were so many points in this book I did love, but it's not that outstanding read for me. And for other people it could be. And that's the beauty of overrating, isn't it? So anyway, has anyone else read this book? If you have, let me know in the comments. And please give this video a like, give me a subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know what book I should talk about next, or kind of like, not because obviously I might have read that book, or you know, maybe give me a few books, or if there's any books that you think are like this book that you think I should read next, if I like that kind of real heavy descriptive language, or a book that, like I said, is something that could just kind of relax you a little bit when you get into bed at night, then leave it in the comments, please. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.